Hey everybody, I'm kind of doing this live pre-recording thing um, due to live streaming going on in my neighborhood or along my internet line. So it's making it difficult to do some of these. I'm hoping I'm catching it at a good time. I was supposed to do this in the morning, but there will be church streaming going on, so I can tell by the last Sunday I did this, a nightmare to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this now, and then you guys can watch it at your leisure. So tonight I'm reading the Namibian Offensive Codename Orcus series, book 3 by Thomas J. Eyre, one of my great friends. He is an awesome writer, and that is what his cover looks like. If you guys have not started this series, I highly recommend that you do it. It's got um, a little bit romance going on to it, but it's mostly man stuff, with lots of blood and gore and shoot 'em up and espionage type stuff, all that good stuff that men like. So, and some of us women like it too. It's a good book though. He's a great author. I really like it. And Thomas, I appreciate you let me read this for you. It just came out on Thursday, which was the day I was supposed to have read this, but I had my surgery, which I'm healing great, y'all. Um, but they did intubate me, so my throat was sore, and there was no way I could read it Thursday night. Um, so I hope you guys enjoy this, and I shall get started here. Okay, and it is British. It is about British soldiers and such, but I shall not be reading it that way. You guys know I don't do British very well. Hold on just a second. I need something between this table and my stomach. Oh, there we go. Okay, so Patrick, chapter 1. Patrick Reagan's phone vibrated quietly in his pocket as it received a message. He flashed the phone, he fished the phone out and unlocked the screen. I'm trying to see which one. I can't read that way. Okay. I'm trying to get this light just right. Do I even need that? Yeah, I do need that. Okay. Ooh. Trying to get this light just right. Nope, right there. Okay. Okay, so let's try this again. Reagan's phone vibrated quietly in his pocket as it received a message. He fished the phone out and unlocked the screen. We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow at 1000 hours, Starbucks, M3, Fleet Series, northbound. How far are we? How far are we off from the M3, Dave? Dave glanced back over his shoulder from the driver's seat. About 150 miles, I think. Why? Just picked up a message from Pete Chapman. He wants a meet in the morning. Has tonight's op been scrubbed? Nope. Tonight go ahead as planned. Cool. Dave sounded a little too keen to get back into action. He should be guarding his leg. But trying to get Dave to rest was a pointless op in itself. Not even Patty's kid sister could talk sense into the stubborn sniper. Patty winced. I knew you would, Vincy. Patty winced at Dave as Dave glanced back over his shoulder while weaving their armored RV and Rover loaded trailer through the M1 traffic. You're not thinking of rolling in there for a meet and greet in Fugly, are you? Nope. I'm hoping to take the Rover provided you don't smash it to hell and back. Keep your eyes front with me. Once Dave had dropped back to the slow lane, Patty took a calming breath and slapped the side of their armored recreational vehicle affectionately. We're not introducing Chapman to this beast until I fully trust him. Nah, I reckon we drift on down the motorway a bit and hole up at the boozer we got shit faced in when we were on the obo job. Break it down a bit, Pads. We've got shit faced in pretty much every boozer between here and the Black Stump. Paddy clicked his fingers, trying to remember. We'd be in Newberry. Oh, Greenham Common Peace Camp. Yeah, I remember ish. We were there. We were with that Welsh twat. Sodic. What was her name? What was his name? Kelly. You mean Kelly? You mean Get Bag Kelly? Patty laughed. Yeah, that was him and his spotter, Chicken George. They were supposed to be relieving us so we could head down to HMS Fearless for transit over to the Northern Ireland. Dumber, Dave yelled. That was the village. Still can't remember the name of the boozer, though. For God's sake, Susie called from her cabin. Just Google it, would you? I don't know why you're fixated on it anyway. It's not like we can check in after 11. Grinning at his sister's grumpy outburst, Patty fired up his iPad and did a quick search. A minute or so later, he had his answer. It's called the Sun Inn. I had to know, or it would have driven me nuts. Dave shrugged. She's right, though. No getting a bed there at this hour. Let's see how the morning goes. I'll shoot down to Fleet to meet up with Chapman, and you and Susie can decide whether to take a day or truck on back to Haven. Sounds like a plan. Dave cleared his throat. Do you think he's organized on our new identities? Patty sighed. Their Cold War bunker and pool might be well equipped and off the radar, but it was hardly a forever home. He could appreciate Dave's itch to have something that felt like a normal life above ground with some actual sunlight. The cabin fever was beginning to drive them all mental. I don't know, mate. I've told him the clock's ticking, though. He had a while to get them sorted. Meet who? Susie asked as she emerged from the cabin, yawning and stretching. Chapman. He wants to chat in the morning. Did you sleep all right, Suze? Yeah, the motion helped. Patty smiled. You were the same as a baby. Whenever I got left to babysit, the only way to get you gnawed off was to take you out for a drive. She grinned, but still looked shaken and pale. Shitty dreams. Non-stop. She rubbed her neck. It helps to know that Grantham's dead, but I still can't find him off in my sleep, no matter how much we practice sparring during the day. I want to throat punch the cocksucker, but I bloody can't. She dropped down onto the couch alongside Patty and leaned up against him. Ladies, is everything okay as far as there's no breakup in the feed or anything like that? I just want to make sure. He let her snuggle up for a minute or two until his expression was slightly less bloodthirsty. Have there been any updates from 5HQ? Hang on, I'll have to look. Susie walked into the galley, hit the switch that lowered the comm screen, and waited as the display warmed up. Patty and Dave's eye in the rear view mirror and appreciated the nod of approval. Quite while the RV had a rear view mirror was with its solid windowless rear, they hadn't worked out, but it was there all the same. Keeping her busy seemed to help. As good a tactic as any until referral for proper treatment for PTSD came through. Bugger all, she reported, stifling a yawn. I could really do with going back to bed. Don't know what's the matter with me. The diving course took it out of me too. Dave said. And mine was years ago, before the extra complicated shit was introduced to the test. Susie's grin returned. It was wicked, though. Thanks, Patty. I still can't believe it. 2 weeks ago, I hadn't even snorkeled, and now I'm an advanced open water diver. Go figure. Thank you, ladies. You're welcome. I think we all needed that break. Staying out of the public eye for a fortnight hadn't hurt his blood pressure either. Susie pulled away, stretching. How much further? I need some scan. About 2 minutes, Dave announced from the front, closing in on the exit ramp from the M1 almost as he spoke. He brought the Action Mobile Desert Challenger, affectionately known as Fugly, up the off ramp on the M1 motorway and into the coach parking area of Rochester Forest Services. The moment they came to a halt, Susie made straight for the door. Hang on a second, don't open that door yet, Patty said, waving his hand across his face to indicate his lack of disguise. I'm still public enemy number one, in case you'd forgotten the small detail. No, I hadn't forgotten, and don't talk to me like I'm a kid. It just slipped my mind. All right, calm down. I wasn't talking to you down to you, sweetheart. Don't call me sweetheart. Suze, if we get identified, then it'll all be a right palaver for Chapman to make this disappear again. The special operations executive gives us a job, a life, and a wage. One of our jobs is to stay invisible in between ops. Got that? Susie nodded sullenly. Patty eased his tone down a notch. And we're not safe till we're done with the Russians. This is bloody Leicester, Pads. We're miles from Dorset. Romanov has brothers and cousins all over the UK. Dave shrugged apologetically. He's right. Mess with one, mess with all. Yeah, but as far as the world's concerned, we're all dead. Last I heard, there's still a contract out on me to the tune of £2 million. Not everyone's bought the story of us being rubbed out by the SAS. How do you know about the bounty? Patty shrugged. Not every purchase from Fugly's upgrade came with a legit invoice. You hear all sort of things when you're dealing with fences. Seeing her deflated expression, he reached over to give her ponytail a gentle tug. I didn't mean to get in your face, love. I just can't take any chances. Need to get my face on before I get out there. It's fine. Just tell me when we're good to go. Patty hugged her, glad that she'd let him. You can't leave yet. Anyway, you still got your slippers on. Shit. She dashed back to her cabin to change into her new combat boots. When she returned, she seemed to have shaken off the fidgets. She took the lightweight Kevlar jacket handed to her without a murmur and strapped it on while Dave got himself ready in the lounge diner area of the RV. When do they time to hit the place? Dave asked. The last intel we got from the Pete Chapman was for 2 a.m. I gotta take these glasses off, y'all. Something's just not right, which means I won't be able to read anything you guys are saying. Hey, Thomas. I hope everything's okay, darling. The last intel we got from Pete Chapman was for 2 a.m. strike on the cash office. Patty took a swig from his water bottle, his mouth suddenly dry. It was just coming up to midnight. The idea was to give Suze a leg stretch and return her to Fugly long before the action went down. There were so many things that could go wrong, like getting themselves killed while Susie was left safely inside Fugly, or Susie having a panic attack and coming to find them at just the wrong moment. Patty was scared to let her out of his sight until he absolutely had to. How does Chapman even know about this robbery? Susie asked Dave, slipping a loose jacket over her vest. GCHQ probably picked it up through Prism, captured a mobile phone conversation. That'd be about the size of it, I reckon, Patty said, pulling on his own vest. Do me a favor, take Susie over to the cafeteria and I'll join you in a minute. Dave moved stiffly to the door and Susie went on out first, offering a hand as he stepped down. Thanks to an Indian summer heat wave, the heat from the tarmac blew into the RV with the breeze. Temperatures were still getting on for 25 degrees even at the end of September. Patty watched his mate and Susie head off, relieved they got along so well. Not even Pete Chapman had any foolproof suggestions for how they'd handle Susie's needs over the coming years, so it was just as well that the three of them seemed basically compatible. Patty opened one of the concealed gun safes and took out his Glock. He ejected the magazine, checked the load and safety, then slid it into the waist holster secreted in the back of his jeans. A light bomber jacket went on over the top of his bulletproof vest, effectively concealing both. He was becoming a master of speed where applying his disguise was concerned. For now, he kept the same alter ego that he had acquired to infiltrate and destroy Rumnavaz's outfit, that of Bill Arkwright, complete with brown contacts to disguise his ice blues, a scar running down his left cheek, and scruffy, gingerish hair and beard. Nonetheless, he still felt worry in public. Dave's ongoing disguise was a white-collar alpha. All he had to do was maintain a fashionable beard and dress like a bloke who spent more time at the gym than in his office. It was annoyingly effective. If Lucas attracted any attention at all, it was in the form of blushes and goofy smiles, not suspicious glances. Thankfully, no photo of Susie had appeared in the media at all, but she'd done a good job of changing her image anyway, cutting and dyeing her hair in the bathroom of the Redoubt. Patty locked up Fugly, even more fuck ugly than ever since Dave's modifications to the shell of the aircon unit on the roof. Behind their beloved scruffy RV stretched the trailer holding the Rover P5. Patty was still annoyed about the short notice on his takedown operation. He'd have preferred to have stashed the car at Haven out of sight, but they'd come here directly from a job in Cumbria where they'd needed both vehicles for separate exits. Patty followed them to Burger King, remaining watchful for faces, exits, and obstacles as he crossed the concourse. Dave would be doing the same, and he'd be glued to Susie's side, ready to take a bullet for her if need be. Patty couldn't have chosen a better bodyguard for her. He saw Dave and Susie at the back of the small queue, waiting to get served. The place was almost deserted, just 2 or 3 tables occupied by long-distance truckers. After they'd eaten, Susie asked if she could go into the amusements arcade for a bit. David finished his meal, so he let her off with a big grin on his face. "Susie," Patty called and waited for her to look back over his shoulder. "Don't let him near the pub quiz machine or we'll be here all night." "Okay," Susie called back and giggled. Patty shook his head, smiled ruefully. He should have guessed she'd be into the machines too. His smile died quickly. Not that she had a choice, but his 15-year-old Spitfire of a sister was growing up way too fast, and traveling around with them while they were on SOE ops was not going to help her hang onto any of the last precious shreds of childhood. She still relived the abuse she'd suffered at Romnavaz and Grantham's hands in her nightmares, sleepwalking and shouting. Chapman had suggested temporary fostering some weeks back, but there was no way they could part from Susie when her yelling threatened to reveal her true identity night after night. Nope, she was staying with them. End of. Patty gave them 20 minutes to play, then wandered into the services phone shop. He bought 3 Apple iPhone watches, including a plum one for Susie. He had the salesgirl set them up with an app linking all 3, turning them into location finders. It was just gone half midnight, time to get Susie back to Fugly before things kicked off, particularly since Dave had no inclination to leave the robbers alive. On their last raid, the bastards had murdered 2 employees at a betting shop, one of them working her last day before maternity leave. He located the gaming arcade, which was set into a little alcove a few doors down from the toilets. But there had been refurbishments. Just a few weeks ago, the arcade had opened out onto the wider concourse like all the other little units. It was now sealed off with a stud wall between the pillars. Patty headed for the window door, wondering if this change was due to some nanny state rule about removing all life's little vices from the immediate public eye. The government had tried doing that with cigarettes, as if hiding fags in a cupboard made people mysteriously forget that they smoked. He opened the arcade door, hackles already up, not liking the change of setup at all. On the one hand, a contained action made it easier for staff to evacuate the rest of the service station. On the other hand, fights in a confined space rarely ended well. As he walked over toward Susie and Dave, a feeling washed over him that something wasn't right. The arcade was quiet. Too quiet. There were probably a half a dozen people scattered around, but nobody was talking. Everyone seemed to be staring straight ahead and saying nothing. The only noise other than the bleeps and squawks of the gaming machines was the gurgle of a baby being held in the arms of a woman standing right next to Dave. Patty walked up behind Susie, his senses on high alert. She was standing unnaturally still. His heart thumped in his chest and cold adrenaline flooded his system at the thought of her being trapped inside with him. It's too early. Why the fuck is this happening so early? A masked man holding a pump-action 12-gauge shotgun stepped out from behind the partition separating the children's and adults' areas and stood in the gap between, covering everyone. Patty heard a swish sound from behind as the window blind was released. A deadbolt clicked into place, locking them all in. "Don't move!" a voice shouted from behind. "Just stay put and nobody gets hurt." Patty picked up an East London accent, Cockney maybe. No hint of Russian. That didn't mean squat, though. There had been plenty of local foot soldiers on Romneval's payroll in Dorset. The man passed Patty on the left and walked up to the change kiosk, where he pointed a pistol at the young girl behind the counter. He nodded towards the cash register. "Open it." The girl's hands were shaking so badly it took several attempts. "You," Cockney said to the lad by the other cash register, "get that one open too." That's going to be my Cockney voice for this one, so get ready. Because I'm not doing Cockney. The boy, around 20 years old and about as jacked as a coat hanger, seemed as nervous as the girl, struggling to get his register open. In the meantime, a 12-gauge began emptying the young girl's register. 12-gauge began emptying the young girl's register into a Haitian sack. When he was done, he laid her out with a punch, sending her crashing to the floor out in the open, away from the counter. She crashed down flat on her back with her skirt gathered around her waist. A 12-gauge bent and tugged her skirt even further up, exposing her panties to all the arcade. "Leave it," Cockney snapped. "Just get the money and we can get out of here and you do the payoff office." Patty took advantage of the brief moment let's try that one again. Patty took advantage of the brief moment both robbers were busy to turn and glance behind him. He stifled exasperation at seeing a third guy, taller and fatter than the other two, also cradling a pump-action 12-gauge. "You," the big guy barked, "you face the front." Ah, so there's the Russian of the crew. Patty had barely locked eyes with the Russian when the big guy took two surprisingly spry paces forward and cracked the butt of the shotgun across Patty's head. His legs folded. White stars exploded and danced across his vision. Once he'd hit the floor, he blinked madly, swallowing his nausea. This what happened when not do as told. Now stand fuck still," Russian shouted at all the others. Faking a slide into unconsciousness, Patty waited for the Russian fucker to stomp past him before slipping his hand beneath his jacket. Russian turned his attention to Susie, bending to put his face close to hers. "Hello, beautiful." Recognizing Susie's pinched expression and death stare, Patty held his breath. "Not now, love. Leave this with me and Dave, please." "What's your name?" "Layla." She was brave enough to stay still as Russian put a hand on her breast, murmuring about her nice titties. He cradled the shotgun on his right arm across his body, its muzzle pointing towards the counter. Patty caught Dave's eye the second his mate took a furtive look downwards, obviously relieved to see him alert. Dave used his eyes, forefinger, and thumb to indicate that he'd take care of Cockney and 12 gauge, still busy on the other side of the counter. That left Patty to swallow his nausea, get to his feet, and handle the guy molesting Suze. A half-throttle cry made Patty jump. Susie had streaked out her hand, going right for the Russian's Adam's apple. While the perv clutched at his throat, Susie grabbed the shotgun and used it as leverage to haul the bigger man towards her so she could ram her kneecap up into his nuts. Ouch. I'm no good at Cockney, Vincy. As the Russian went down, Susie snatched the gun out of his hands and fired it at 12 gauge, knocking him out. All right, let's try this again. As the Russian went down, Susie snatched the gun out of his hands and fired it at 12 gauge, knocking him off his feet. The lady with the baby whimpered, turning away from the blood that had sprayed up the wall. Christ, Susie, good girl, but stay still now. Easy. Dead-Eye Susie racked the shotgun, ejecting the empty case just as Cockney span around to face her. He found himself looking down the barrel of Patty's Glock. Cockney released his grip on his weapon, which clattered onto the floor, and raised his hands in surrender. Dave slipped behind Cockney in one sleek movement and dealt him a swift crack around the head with his gun. Cockney folded like a sodden napkin. Well done, Suze, Dave said, making to take the shotgun from his hands. Noting she'd seemed to have frozen, he tugged gently. Here, let me have that. Don't! Dave stepped back. Girl, we need to move. Susie put the shotgun down on the counter and kneeled down by the gasping Russian who was still writhing on the floor, cradling his crushed nuts. Just remember, sometimes girls fight back. She straightened up, the color dropping out of her face. Dave got his arms around her waist just as she toppled sideways. Patty heard sirens. He turned to the skinny lad, whose badge proclaimed him to be the duty manager. Son, where's the fire exit? The kid flicked a thumb behind him, indicating the kid's area. It'll bring you out by the recycling bins. Patty led Dave and Susie out of the building, and they darted across the coach park, back to Fugly and the trailer housing the Rover 5. The sirens had stopped, but the distant car park was now awash with flashing blue lights. Give me a minute, Patty said, dropping the tailgate on the trailer. He fired up the Rover, reversed it clear, then put it into park before putting the tailgate back up. By the time he got back into the driver's seat, Dave and Susie were already in the car. Patty flicked the switch on the dash that rotated the diplomatic plates into place and then floored the throttle. Why don't we just take Fugly? Susie asked, cowering in the back. Just doing a loop, love, Patty said. Stay out of your eye shot for a bit. Right. She couldn't sound less reassured. Patty looked at her in the rear view and spotted all the signs of an impending chuck-up. Can we stop? I feel sick. Thankfully, Dave was on top of things already, handing her a massive brown paper bag. He shuffled down to take the middle seat, rubbing her back as she retched until she brought up nothing but bile. Once she was done, Patty saw Dave pull her to his chest, gently stroking her hair. Oh, don't. I stink. Do you want a bit of space? I can move. You're good, she groaned, leaning back into him. Patty kept an anxious eye on her over the next few miles as he doubled back on the M1 and returned to the northbound side of the services. She was still shivering, long after the adrenaline should have subsided. Once he parked up in the darkness between two articulated lorries, he shut down the engine and turned in his seat to face them. How are you feeling, Sue? How you feeling now, Suze? I just killed someone. If you hadn't shot him, he could have panicked and shot the girl with the baby, or God forbid, the baby. You did well back there. Did I? She buried her head back in Dave's chest, sobbing. Patty turned back in his seat and left them to it. When the silence became too oppressive, he switched the radio on. They wound down with a few cheesy 80s rock anthems before the news came on with the headline story about 3 armed males being injured in a failed robbery attempt on the cash office at Leicester Forest Services. Armed police were on scene and the situation was under control. He held his breath as Susie lifted her head, taking an interest. Just injured? She asked quietly. Patty nodded. That's what I heard too. Not dead? Right. She sagged in her seat. Can we go home now? Chapter 2. Patty arrived roughly an hour ahead of time for his meet with Chapman at Fleet Services. While he wasn't anticipating any trouble, he'd come prepared for it. Once he had parked, he leaned forward in his seat and tucked his trusty Glock into the waistband at the back of his jeans. He then spent the majority of the hour scouting the service area. The breeze on his face gave him a little relief to offset the growing heat inside the Kevlar vest hid beneath his lightweight jacket. A few minutes before 10, he wandered back to the car park and took up station on a bench not far from the Rover P5. He couldn't help smiling as he clocked a couple of guys checking out the pinstripe example of the now vintage motor. Take a good look, lads. You won't find another in that condition and with only a few hundred miles on the clock. He watched as a people carrier pulled up on the right of the P5. He was just approaching of the tidy parking when a boy seated in the back flung the door open, making Patty shriek inwardly. He restrained himself from leaping to his feet. The P5 could survive a hit from a landmine, but the old girl's paint job was just a smidge less vulnerable than any other car's. He had heard the mother give a child a dressing down, telling him he'd almost cost them a fortune. Morning, Reagan. Patty looked up to see Chapman holding out a coffee. Where the hell did you come from? Chapman sat down on the bench next to him, lowering a laptop case to the ground. We all need our secrets, Patty. So what's in this cup, or is that the state secret? Black Americano. Chapman passed over a handful of sachets. Couldn't remember if you took sugar. Nah, you're all right. I'll keep these for later, though. Cheers. Chapman bit down to unzip his case and remove a handful of A4 envelopes. Right. I haven't got long. 2 things we need to discuss. First off, these are your new identities. Patty's was in the first envelope. He was still Patrick, but had apparently become a Foster. Dave was simply Jones. Reasonably obnoxious, Chapman said, then sipped his coffee. Surprised you didn't call me Smith. Don't be daft. Ignoring Chapman's sharp tone, a bit hit and miss, the bloke's sense of humor, Patty had a quick skim through both sets of documents, searching for what he really wanted to see. The deeds for the abandoned farmstead he and Dave had eyed. The ideal property had a house and 2 barns, and it was a good distance from the road. Even better, it had a spacious storm cellar, big enough for their vehicles, and a ramp. A perfect place to move their little operation to, ideally before Sarah got back from her trek to Namibian. Much as Sarah loved her boss, Bob, and the easygoing work at the Easy Reef warehouse, Patty couldn't help feeling that she must have needed some time to do something more rewarding than answering phones and organizing yacht repairs. She'd been a doctor once. Hopefully her time dealing with the new Ebola crisis would be good for her. Remind her of what she'd been so damn good at before sacrificing everything by caving into her father's desperate pleas to let him pass sooner and more peacefully. It made him furious sometimes the way she'd been treated by the General Medical Council. Her getting struck off for terminating months of agony at her father's request wasn't right at all. He sighed. Had one last rifle through the papers to see if he missed anything, then glanced over at Chapman. What's going on with our accommodation? We're on it. You've been working on it for weeks. It's a bloody derelict building. How hard can it be? You said you wanted to expand. Yeah, it's on a 30-acre plot. Can't see a problem. It's called planning permission pads. We're mere mortals. We mere mortals have to abide by it. Like I said, I'm working on it. Chapman nodded at the third envelope. Have a quick look at Susie's documentation. Patty was impressed by the bundle, which included, among various fake school certificates, a cash card to access her own bank account under the name of Susan Foster. Her A-level results were at the back of the bundle. He frowned. Hang about, she's not even finished her GCSEs. He opened her passport, which put her date of birth 3 years earlier. Susan had become 18. You're having a giraffe. Problem? Patty eyed Chapman sharply. This is her reserve ID, yeah? It's her ID, full stop. Chapman said simply, both her parents are dead, which makes her a ward of court. Rather awkward, given your line of work. Easier to make her an adult, all told. Patty stared, wondering how long it had been since Chapman had encountered any teenagers. Look, I'm going to say this once. She's still a child and she's living with PTSD after multiple assaults. I'm not telling her she's 18. No fucking way. Keep your voice down. I can't believe you didn't think that through. On the contrary, a lot of thought was put into, doesn't bloody seem like it. She's a forceful personality as it is. The last thing I need is to have a row with her and for her to throw her passport at me and tell me she's an adult. Nope, not going there. He pulled his Kevlar loose from his upper chest with a finger, feeling even hotter all of a sudden. If this is about her being a ward of the court, how about clearing a private fostering arrangement? Looks like you've listed me as her uncle on the passport anyway, so just make me her legal guardian. Davis the secondary. To hell with it. Make us both godfathers. Chapman looked thoughtful. We can do that, but what about a female relative? Sarah, hopefully, if she hasn't had second thoughts about us while she's away. Patty swallowed, finding it harder by the day to dismiss his unease at the very little contact he had had from her since she started her volunteering stint with Medicine Sans Frontières. There were only so many times he could remind himself the internet and mobile signals were probably worse than shit in Zoomed. Zoom. I don't even know. Reagan, you all right? You're miles away. No female relative as yet. Is that specifically necessary? It helps. The system is still very mother-centric. The first glint of humanity showed in Chapman's eyes. Out of interest, is there anyone close to you? Anyone I need to know about? Patty took a deep swallow on his coffee. Now it was cool enough. He didn't want to jinx anything by handing Sarah's name over to Chapman before she'd even got back from Africa. If you're attached to someone in particular, then now's the time to tell me. Gives me a head start on the vetting process, if nothing else. Nothing to report, Patty snapped. Next on your agenda? Well, you've complicated that a little with your views on Susie's ID. I did have a psychiatric referral lined up for her, but I'll have to rearrange it through pediatric mental health now. It'll take another couple of weeks to rearrange. I love my new desk. It's got all these neat little holders I don't have to hold my tablet up with. Patty winced at the delay, feeling guilty about causing it. Susie's attention span had suffered badly, along with her temper and impulse control. He was beyond grateful that she could handle herself in a fight, but dreaded to think what kind of shitstorm was brewing in her head half the time. Peter reached for Susie's envelope. I'll hang on to these while we get fresh documents processed. Sweet. How are you going to get them to us? When you go in to see the doctor with Susan, he'll have them. Chapman closed his bag up and lifted it onto the bench. Anytime you want to ask me while anything you want to ask me while I'm here. Patty nodded, needed to raise something he and Dave had discussed. I have to get something clear in my head about the way Dave and I will work. Department U will select the targets and we just take them out, right? In a nutshell, yes. So what if we come across a target of opportunity not on the list? Then what? If we're not given free reign, then we drop back into the shadows. I'm so done with PC. Think of yourselves as being primarily intelligence-led. Patty caught Chapman's emphasis. Primarily? It's Eyre Department policy to eradicate organizations which persist in existing outside the justice system. You're the pointy bit of the skewer. I accept that sometimes you'll have to make decisions on the ground as the situation unfolds. Does that answer your question? Patty grinned, the wind taken out of his sails somewhat. That was vague as fuck, but I think we're good. He got to his feet, pleased to be able to tell Dave that they pretty much had carte blanche to deal with the remaining Russian factions as the need rose. Eliminating the sponsors of the bounty on his head was quite high up on his list of priorities. One last thing, Reagan. Give me an address. Even if it's a bloody post box. There's got to be some level of mutual trust or this isn't going to work. What have you put on our driver's license then? Plausible accommodation. Make sure you learn the address off by heart. Chapman straightened up his lips then. Reagan, I'm stuck my neck out for you. Throw me a bone or I'll chuck the whole fucking skeleton at you. Patty got to his feet. I think we can manage a post box number. Don't string yourself, old chap. The SOE director rolled his eyes, grabbed his case, and walked back into the services through the coffee shop. Patty drained the last mouthful of coffee and made his way back to the Rover. Knackered, he drove on autopilot, finding himself almost dropping off as he drew closer to the old Cold War bunker just outside Warham. His eyelids grew heavy. He opened the window and stuck his head out into the slipstream, keeping it there for a few seconds before sitting back properly and rubbing his eyes. For all its faults, the old bunker beneath his late stepfather's yacht warehouse seemed like heaven right now. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Haven may be all hyper-functional furniture and big, empty, echoing spaces, but oh man, that shower was to die for. The buzz and vibrations of the lane markers jolted him alert. He pulled off the hard shoulder with a jerk, almost heading straight at the back of a broken-down truck. He yanked the wheel, putting the P5 back into its lane. By the time his adrenaline rush had worn off, he was almost back home. After a nap and a power shower, Patty limped out of his Spartan bedroom in vest and tracky bottoms to find Susie and Dave watching a current affairs program, both their faces grim. He stood at the side of the sofa, craning his neck to avoid the reflected glare of the white overhead lights on the screen. Smarmy host Philip Hamworth was hosting 4 pundits in a debate about Patty's rampage and subsequent death at the hands of the SAS, along with that of his younger sister, fellow Marine David Lucas, and the late Security Services Chief Sir Charles Grantham. The discussion raged back and forth as to whether Patty and co were victims of circumstance heroes or self-righteous villains. James Smalls predictably decried them all as terrorists. Patty kept a peripheral eye on Dave, whose jaw muscle was bouncing as fast as his foot. Roger Fulcombe had advocated their heroics, their determination to stick their neck out and do what needed to be done to bring down a criminal network. The sole female voice belonged to campaigning actress Fiona Adams, whose only contribution was to repeatedly laminate the death of poor Susan Morgan, who's shown such talent and the potential as a flautist. What is that? I don't know that. I don't know that word. Susie snorted. They obviously spoke to my music teacher while she was drunk. I got as far as grade 3 before being chucked out of that class. The problem, Smalls whined on screen, is that with where we end up as a society if we condone vigilante activity on this scale. For the love of God, Fulcombe cut in. Reagan's parents were killed and his teenage sister kidnapped. They don't mention my poor brother, I noticed, Patty muttered. Reagan had gone to the police. He had sought assistance through the correct channels, as you are so fond of calling them. Smiles made a whiny noise. When things come to pass that collateral damage includes the death of someone of Sir Charles's caliber, we have to question whether the cessation of activities in a small group of Russian. Dave stabbed the TV remote at the screen, shutting down the debate with extreme prejudice. I'm off to the gym to punch something into the middle of next year. Patty patted his shoulder as he left. Dave was good like that, taking his foul mood to another room rather than infecting Susie with it. It wasn't easy for any of them to hear people canonizing Sir Charles Grantham as a tragic victim of an SAS crossfire when he'd been in bed with the Russians all along. In fact, they'd supplied an unending queue of underage girls for his bed. On bad days, claustrophobic, frustrating days, it made Patty as mad as hellfire that Grantham got to take off his grubby secrets to his grave with him. He flumped himself down where Dave had been sitting and stretched his arm along the back of the couch. Susie snuggled up, which was fine. Paddington leapt up onto his lap, which was less fine. Patty grunted as several stone of Rottweiler made itself comfortable on his groin. Down, Susie commanded. Paddington reached over and slimed her face, otherwise not moving an inch. Patty stroked the smooth head and resigned himself to being crushed. At least he'd sorted some obedience lessons for the dog, and not before bloody time. Susie turned on her seat, legs crossed. So what did Chapman say? He groaned, resting his head back. You're not going to like it. Out with it. We'll be in Haven a while longer. The farm's a no-go just yet. Susie folded her arms, scowling. Tell me about it. I'm well aware that the survivalist novelty's wearing off. He looked up at the flimsy, grubby foam tiles of the living quarters within the old redoubt, pining for a white ceiling with black beams, windows that would let in actual sunlight, doors which led outside on the same level instead of an airlock, elevator, ladder, and then a high security trapdoor beneath the Easy Reef warehouse. These Cold War bunkers were as uncomfortable as they were safe. How about the IDs? Mine and Dave's are done. Yours is pending. They've just got some background material to finalize for you. He cleared his throat, feeling the lie heat his cheeks. What are you not telling me? She tilted her head suspiciously. Patty, what are you leaving out? I've been made your legal guardian. You'll be my 15-year-old niece. And this means I'm responsible for making decisions on your behalf. Aren't you already? Okay. I've just never seen it spelt that way. Sorry. My bad. Her nonchalance was unnerving him. So when we finally get to a point where we can fully adopt new lives with our new identities. Oh, I mean, it's him reading. So when we finally get to a point where we can fully adopt new lives with our new identities, I'll be in charge of deciding where you go to school. What? She looked horrified. You're my brother, not my dad. You can't make me go back to school. Patty grimaced. Okay, now you're seeing the issue. She paled. Don't tell me that Dave's suddenly my uncle as well. Nope, he's Dave Jones, my long-term colleague and your second godfather. Any problems with that part? She looked relieved. No, I'm good with that, but what about my name? Will Chapman change it to yours? I don't think Patty would suit you. She did the default teenager eye roll, but grinned right on the back of it. Ha-de-da. Seriously, though, I don't want to be a Morgan anymore. I want no part of that wanker. Yeah, all right, Susie, enough of that. His sister gaped. Are you a hypocrite or what? I didn't see you for fucking years because of how much you hated my dad. Yep, you're on rocky ground there, son. Patty twisted in his seat to hold her gaze. Exactly. I missed out on a proper relationship with you and Mum because of it. Don't waste your energy hating him like I did. He's still your dad. No, he wasn't. No father would sell their own daughter to be used as a prostitute. It wasn't quite like that. He used me as collateral to sort his debts out. No, we need to be fair. Morgan was trying to get you away from the Russians when they killed him. Don't you dare defend him, Patrick. You've been more of a dad to me than Dodgy Roger ever was. He never wanted to know me when I was little, and after he sent me to that boarding school, it was just as if I didn't exist. You have a point. Patty slumped back in his seat, saving his energy for round two, which would have to take place after he had had more sleep. Let's just forget him, eh? You've got enough on your plate as it is. Deal. Susie got up, dropped a quick kiss on his head, and stalked back to her room. Patty groaned with relief as she moved away, and not just because Paddington had leapt off his lap and followed her. She dreaded this appointment for a whole week. The office walls seemed to close in on Susie, however much she paced. Patty kept his head down in the corner, his face buried in an old Top Gear magazine. 2 years back, though it felt a lot longer than that, she'd said something rude about one of the year 10 girls in a supposedly secret chat in her dorm at school. Her contribution to the giggly conversation was hardly the worst, not compared to Jessamy's comments, yet it had been her remarks alone which had been repeated around the whole school by lunchtime the next day. Weirdly, her other 3 roommates emerged from the scandal looking purer than the driven fucking snow. By the time the school-wide silent treatment had eased off, she had lost half a stone in weight and had shed more blonde hair than a golden retriever. Until her abduction, that incident had been hands down the most traumatic she'd ever experienced. Susie stared at the door separating Dr. Drake's office from the waiting area and wiped the sweat from her lips with the back of her hand. This shrink appointment was a very close third. She really, really didn't want to talk about what happened with Grantham on the Deep Quest. Not to anyone, and particularly not in front of Patty. She could barely think about he'd done to her on that boat, and worse, she hadn't fought him off. How could she explain that she just sort of let it happen? By that point, she was just grateful that he was nowhere near as rough as Romanov or his boys. He'd been lover-like, almost. Just thinking about Grantham's hands on her still made her pulse gallop and her gut lurch. She still hated her stupid body for responding. You can go in now, said the receptionist from behind her desk. Patty got up from the couch and took Susie's hand, squeezing lightly. I know you're scared. You don't know the half of it, Pads. Patty opened the door of Dr. Drake's office and tugged her in behind him. Susie pulled back a half step, keeping Patty between herself and the doctor. Come Come on in, Miss Foster. Susie, nice to meet you both. Drake shook Patty's hand and waved them both to an L shaped couch in the corner. She was relieved he didn't try to shake her hand as he had her brother's. It is Susan or Susie. Is it Susan or Susie? Suze or Susie. I'm good with either. You can call me Edward if it gets me out of here faster. She lowered herself under the couch, sitting as close to Patty as possible as the psychiatrist settled himself at the narrow end of the L. I've read the file that was forwarded to me. He met her eye steadily. You're an incredibly strong young lady. Yours is rare and terrible ordeal. She swallowed, determined not to let her sympathy crumble her barriers. It had always been hard keeping her wall up when people were nice. When they were shits, it was easy. There's no obligation to be strong, Susie. She snorted, wondering how much he really knew about what was expected of her. To silence her cries in the night to the boys, so the boys could sleep in the next room of the bunker. To act like claustrophobia was an alien concept, as if she was taking an indefinite holiday in an underground car park. To pretend to herself day after day that Dave was just her brother's best friend. Her lip jerked. How have you been? How'd you think? I don't know, Susie. People react to aftermath of trauma in many different ways. I'd like to talk about how you've been coping. Susie looked at Patty with pleading eyes. She couldn't talk about any of this in front of him, but didn't want to tell him to go away either. I just need to sleep. I know I'm not coping, but when I can sleep, which is hardly ever, I have bad dreams. I'd sooner just get some antidepressants or zonk out tablets and be done with it. Patty put his hand on her knees. Let's hear the doctor out, okay? He's the one who understands what you're going through. Dr. Drake ran a hand over his shortcut hair. I think it's important to keep an open mind about what these sessions can achieve. I'm happy to prescribe a short course of low dose Phenergan to break you out of the insomnia cycle, but that's not going to scratch the surface of the level of panic that comes with PTSD. And given your age, I'm extremely reluctant to consider sertraline or similar. I know about antidepressants. I know they can make you a bit of a zombie and all that, but I can deal with that if it stops the shit going around in my head. Look, Suze, the doctor says pills won't work, so whose side are you on, Patty? Susie straightened in her seat. Well, screw you and screw this. I don't want to fucking talk. Pad leaned against her, his voice warning that she was hurtling too far off the rails. Calm down and listen. It can't do any harm to listen, yeah? Susie? What? She snapped, glaring at Drake for cutting in on the argument. There is no quick fix for what you've been through. Right. That's going to help me keep an open mind, is it? Fuck's sake. What kind of shrink are you? Suze, Patty barked. You've barely let him speak. Take a breath, open your ears, and stop swearing. Dr. Drake, totally unfazed, leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I think you would benefit from some hypnotherapy. How would you feel about that? What if I talk about Dave? She took a sharp breath, shaking her head hard. She could barely confess her feelings for him to herself, let alone open her trap by accident to anyone else. The force of her feelings for him felt all wrong, too, like it wasn't supposed to happen like this. She should feel panicky and angry if any man came near her, right? She stared out the window, considering the half-truth of the situation. The Russian fuckwit who'd grabbed her tits at the service station had unleashed the red mist almost instantly. That had been reassuring in some ways, but when Dave had propped her up afterwards, she'd been gutted when he'd finally let go. I'm talking about a deep meditative state, Drake went on. Your uncle can remain in the room with every session, or you could request a female nurse to sit in as a chaperone. No, no hypno. Tell me about the talking therapy thing. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw her brother sag with relief that she wasn't rejecting everything. Dr. Drake remained totally calm, apparently immune to having his head bitten off. Maybe she could just chat about general stuff with him if he promised that what he said in the room stayed in the room. Counseling still seemed pointless, but if it was a damn sight better than Patty hearing stuff he didn't need to about Grantham or about Dave. Drake smiled warmly. Would it help if I told you a bit about me? She gave the world's tiniest nod. I served in Eyre, that's the 2nd Battalion of the Parachute Regiment. I saw active service in the Falklands War, the First Gulf War, then Iraqi freedom, and also in Afghanistan. Susie blinked. Really? So you've been about a bit then? I've seen firsthand the conditions and circumstances that lead to post-traumatic stress disorder, and I've helped several dozen former service personnel come to terms with their condition, managing it successfully. What? Just with talking and hypnosis? No, PTSD is actually a physical neurological problem. It's not a failure to manage your emotions. Do you suffer from flashbacks, as in, do you find yourself reliving? I know what a flashback is, thanks. And yes, she gripped her knees. I find engine noises difficult. I start smelling engine oil and then stinking aftershave, chalk, smelly sheets. And do you have the same experience with any specific visual triggers? She stared down at the carpet, feeling sick. Some days, everything. I think you'd benefit from a few sessions of EMDR. EMDR? Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. PTSD is like a filing error in the brain, and EMDR helps the brain to sort of defrag. Don't blind me with science, Doc. Drake worked a smile even as Patty buried his face in his hands. There's a lot of information on the process which perhaps you'd like to read in your own time. Do you have a preference for paperback, ebook, or a series of web links? Links, please. Can't focus on a book. That's fine. Drake got to his feet and put his chair back. There's homework to do before our next session, I'm afraid. Patty frowned. What? We're done here? For now, I would like to see Susie in a fortnight after her Vinegaring course. Susie, if the volume in material gets a bit much, I'd like you to focus on the first 4 links I'll send you by email, which are about bilateral stimulation psychotherapy. It'll give you a better idea of what to expect from our sessions. Her legs were a little weak and trembly as she stood, but she surprised herself by reaching for the doctor's hand. Sorry I kicked off. I got scared. I think we'll get along just fine. Alrighty, what do you guys think? Thomas, here we call him flutist. And yours had an A in it. I don't know if that was meant to be there or what, but I was having a hard time with that word. Ugh. There we go. So, The Namibian Offensive, a Patty Reagan thriller, cold. Let's go back to cover so I can read it correctly. Cover. Codename Orcus Series Book 3. It is free on KU. And Thomas, somebody will have to put the links up there. Guys, the links are in the nook, so you can go there to see. Thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate this being kind of a whatever, Thomas. You guys just talk funny. That's all there is to it. You talk funny and you spell funny. So, Sorry, my neighbor's doing something goofy. So everybody go get it. You need to start the first book. It is a really good series. Vincey can vouch for that and a few others. It is such a great series. So go get these, read them, and see what you think. Let us know. Give him a good review, y'all. He needs some love. Show the man some love. He's love deprived. He's got them lined up around the corner. Lester. Sorry. See, another one. See, you spelled it right when you pronounced Lester. You just spell stuff funny. And you talk funny. So, all righty. Love you, Thomas. And Ori, I love you too, darling. We're going to talk to you guys later. Vincey, Shirley, Jackie, anybody else I missed on here, thank you for showing up. I appreciate it. And you guys have a good one. Happy reading.